All right. Hey guys, everyone. We have another guest speaker this week, and this is a guy that came into sales with no formal training, no experience, and in a relatively short amount of time has done over $350 million in sales. He's an emerging thought leader in the field of sales. I love his book, Top Sales Producer, which is on that shelf behind him in your screen, and one that we might see in Belmont Abbey here very shortly. But want to introduce Andrew Barbuto. Uh, kind enough to take some time out of his day and talk about his career, his journey, and really just some of the great information that he's taken in, digested, and included in his various materials.
Yeah, hey Mike, thanks for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Awesome. Andrew, I think something that a lot of people think of sales is they watch Wolf of Wall Street. If they're older, maybe they've seen Glengarry Glen Ross, or they think of their experience buying a car and they think it's this set of magic words or something that they've seen in those movies. And you have a really different philosophy on that, one that I share. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so great movie, first off. And the it's funny you mentioned that because that was my perspective going into it as well, right? Like one of the things that they really glamorize in that movie and other movies that cover sales is like how to be super persuasive. How do you say the right words to convince somebody of something? And that's what a lot of people think that sales is. It's really like sales presentations, right? That was my thought process as well when I first went into it. And it took me a little while to realize that that's really not what sales is about, not in, at least in like B2B sales, uh, where it is much more to do with less about like presenting the perfect words and more about having conversations with people, learning about their real needs, not just things that you want them to believe. And it's much more like this, having conversations, finding out, what exactly they're trying to accomplish, and truly what it's about is helping people. So once you've uncovered those needs, presenting your solution in a way that aligns with them. That's really what it is. It took me a little while to understand that, and how I really came to that conclusion was really early on in my career. I struggled at the beginning, like you said, because I had no real formal sales training, like a lot of people that enter the field. You have that misconception, right? Yeah, I honestly don't know anybody that had like initial like true sales training. They get product training, but not really sales training, right? And so because of that, a lot of people have that misconception. I was no different, and I think I struggled at the beginning as a result. Uh, and so basically it took a lot of trial and error and some pretty harsh feedback from my manager to understand, what exactly it is. And I could just give you a quick story, up front as
Yeah.
to like how it happened. So, it was my one of my early on sales meeting. It was one of my first in person. I spent a lot of time preparing for it. I basically built what I thought was a great, presentation, very tailored, did a lot of research, did all of the basically what I thought they would want to say to make my case, right? And so I go into the meeting with my manager, and I was, aiming to impress them. And basically, I pulled up the presentation and I gave it. I didn't really veer off too much, right? When they jumped in, I kind of may have addressed it, but I really got back to the script. And I wanted to make sure that I got through all the things I prepared. And so by the end of it, I thought like, that went pretty well, right? But then my manager pulled me aside in his office afterwards. And I was surprised at the feedback he gave. He was basically like, hey man, like, you are obviously very well prepared, but you need to be more flexible. You need to listen more. There was a couple times you cut them off. And so, you know, at first I was defensive about it, of course, right? So I was like, oh, I was the one presenting. You were sitting there. It's easy for you to say, right? So a couple weeks later, we went back and he presented while I listened. And that was really eye-opening by sitting there and watching the presentation. I saw exactly what he was talking about, right? Because once you actually like can like visualize the person, you're there, like you're seeing their reaction, questions that they have. You get that perspective. It's like, well, yeah, we should have pivoted here. This is something they care about. Like once you actually listen to what their needs are instead of so much effort presenting the right words, that's when you can truly have more productive conversations. So that was a real turning point for me, and I saw my meeting productivity go up substantially since then. So, long-winded way of saying that sales is typically different than the way that people they portray it in the movies and how people expect it to go into when they enter into it.
Man, it's funny you share that story. I had a very similar experience early in my career. It was my first ever meeting when I took the sales job at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Went up to New York for a meeting with our executive director, Winston Kelly. Sat down, did the meeting, flew home. We carpooled to the airport. And as we're going back to our cars after our return flight, he's like, "How do you think you did?" And I was like, I feel like I definitely fumbled some stuff into delivery. He's like, "I'm just gonna tell you, I'll give you an A plus on preparation and a C minus on delivery." And it was like, man, I didn't get a lot of C's growing up, so that kind of hit hard. And it really made me reflect and try to figure out some ways that I could do better in that process. Um,
Did, did they explain what prompted the C, like
He
what you could
did.
have done better?
Yeah, yeah, and it was really like I did so much preparation, and it was also my first time ever doing a sales meeting for that property and that like set of assets that I probably just used it as a crutch too much. And it's okay, someone would ask a really insightful question and I'd answer it briefly and then I'd go right back to that crutch. And it was just something that I had to grow out of over the years.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that anytime you start something new to begin with, like you're not going to be great right away. But I also think that it's also that result of the misconception of what sales actually is. Like, because I still see it today where I'll have meetings with vendors and I go in with a specific need and then they start presenting like the history of their company and they go through this entire presentation. We don't get a word in edgewise. And actually something interesting that I did before I entered into sales, which should have shaped my perspective, but still like when you're starting out, right? Like you're nervous, you're not really experienced. And so you want to make sure that you are saying all the right words and that you tend to lean on things like a deck and all that stuff. What I did was I actually set up time with a lot of my favorite sales reps that I had because I had the opportunity to in my position I was an account manager. I got pitched to a lot and I just basically set up a whole bunch of them to see what it was like on the other side of the table and see what worked and what didn't. And it was very eye-opening. Basically, long story short, the learnings were the worst sales reps spoke the whole time, right? The decent sales reps basically spoke a little bit, but didn't really ask a lot of questions, didn't speak enough about their solution. And the best reps did a combination of one, making sure that I spoke about my needs, right? I didn't get to leave without that. I didn't get to leave without clear next steps and tailored their solution based on what I told them. So it's about having more of a back and forth conversation. So that way, when you do present your solution, it is super relevant to the person on the other side of the table's needs, as opposed to just, here are the reasons why we're the best at what we do.
Yeah, no, that magic words thing rings true. We finished up mock discovery calls last night, and after one of the calls, and we do a little reflection, and one of the students was like, "Man, I could sit down and make just a great written proposal and organize my thoughts, but I just can't find those magic words." I was like, "There aren't magic words. It's just got to be authentic. It's got to be relevant. It's got to be contextual and conversational and relational." Um,
Totally.
but to that point, not everyone going through this course wants to grow up and do what we do, and have
Smart.
that be how they apply this degree and this everything that they're learning. Can you talk about sales more broadly? Because I think a lot of people think, okay, sales is getting someone to buy something and it's transactional, and really sales acumen is applicable across the entire realm of business. Can you touch on that a little
Mhm.
bit?
Totally, yeah. And especially in business, like, it applies to a lot of areas of life as well. But in business in particular, right? When I think about sales acumen and the importance of it, what I really think about and how it applies to everything else is about um, in general, in business, you're going to have to get people to do what you want, right? You're going to have to get responses. You're going to have to get, persuade them or influence them to make certain decisions, whether it be getting a promotion, getting a job, right? You're interviewing, or whether you're like more of an account management role and you have clients, but you're not necessarily responsible for closing. You're responsible for getting them to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that things stay on track, right? That sales acumen applies to all of those because what sales acumen really is the ability to empathize with the other side, with the person you're speaking to, and position yourself in a way that aligns with what they care about. You want to get someone's attention in our very busy world, and in business, it's no different, right? People have a million different priorities. In order to get their attention, you have to align how you're speaking to them with what they care about. That's truly the best way to influence somebody. So it's about tailoring your conversations, putting yourself in their shoes, understanding, what it is that they're going through on a regular basis, and also, speaking in a concise way, a way that, you would, read it and want to organize your thoughts and be able to like digest it very quickly. And so it's about like all communication and understanding that the way to get somebody, to do what you want, regardless of it's a job interview, regardless of if it's like a client getting them to, send over tags or something, like what we deal with, or even if it's about getting a promotion, it's about understanding, okay, what is it that the other person is trying to accomplish, and then aligning with those goals, right? So if it's a job interview, then understanding what it is they're looking for, and that has to do with a lot of like questions like, what are you looking for in this role? What makes a good person that does this role? And then describing yourself in a way that helps them achieve those goals. Same thing that applies to, getting a client to do something. Why is it important based on what they care about? And again, if you're trying to get a promotion, understanding what it is your managers, what they care about, what is their, and how you can help them with that. So it applies to pretty much everything. It's about being concise, digestible, tailored to their needs, and just generally the ability to empathize with the other person on the side that you're talking to. That's the best way that you're going to be able to succeed in many facets of business.
Yeah, Dr. Cunningham, who leads this program, he's a big fan of Chris Voss's book and says he should have just titled it Tactical Empathy because that's pretty
Mhm.
much what it is. But just the importance of being empathetic in
Yeah,
using that. Go ahead.
Zig Ziglar has a quote that I love, and it really applies to this, which is like, in order to get somebody to do what you want them to do, you have to help them get what they want. You know what I mean? Like directly align it, and that's exactly what it is.
So, I mean, that's a great segue into discovery and just your approach to that and not just going in with a solution without first understanding the problem.
hmm Exactly. So when I talk about in my book is I talk about it kind of like not treating meetings, sales meetings like a vendor sales meeting presentation, right? And treating it more like a doctor's visit. When you think about like when you go to a doctor, typically, they gather some information from you beforehand. You go in typically with a problem already, or you go in with a general checkup, and they will ask you questions about that problem. They want to understand all of the details, including that background knowledge about like what are your ailments, what symptoms have you been experiencing, etc. So that way they can then make a prescription that aligns with that based on their expertise. That is exactly the way that we should be treating sales meetings, which is we find out as much as we possibly can about the person beforehand, right? You could find out a ton of information online, their website, their LinkedIn. You could put it into AI. Basically, if it's a public company, you could find a lot from their earnings reports and stuff like that, right? There's a ton of information that you can find out from that. And then go into it with a hypothesis of how you can likely help based on needs of similar types of personas, right? People that are similar. And then, you go in there to confirm those needs. So asking all those key questions that you weren't able to find or to confirm what you were able to find. So that way you can best determine, okay, what exactly are their needs and what is the solution that we offer that aligns with them. That is, and understanding qualifications around Do they have the personnel for it? Do they have the resources for it? Do they have the budget for it? You need to learn all of the context as well as their needs. Once you've gathered all that information, then you can make a confident recommendation that once you tailor it to what they've told you, it will be much more natural. And sometimes that means disqualifying. Sometimes that means you can't help them. But that's why it's important that you're an expert on who exactly you can help, what resources they need, and then you can then make a determination based on that expertise once you've learned everything from the person you're speaking to, and also understand exactly how similar types of customers, how they are typically helped by your solution. So that way you can make a recommendation based on rationale and logic that from what they've already told you.
I often find myself fighting that temptation to jump right from hypothesis to solution without doing that act of confirmation or just a little bit of extra discovery. And have found that some of the worst meetings are when you do that, and some of the best ones are really when you could get them talking, and you always learn something that you didn't know, whether, like you said, the internal politics or where they are in a planning cycle or a budgeting cycle. There's always so much that you don't know that you could gather from a prospect as long as you're going through the right steps to do that.
Or if they're the right person to make this sort of decision.
Yeah.
That's a huge one.
Which is a great segue into prospecting and just we're not just looking at companies, I could find the ideal advertiser for Flow Sports because they're buying every single one of our competitors and we over-index in their category. Um, I could do that all day long, but if not finding the right person at that company, not going to be successful. Can you just talk a little bit about prospecting and then doing that at both the company level and the individual level?
Yeah. So I break this out into two different chapters in my book. One is purely based on research because I think that who you are reaching out to and when is just as important, if not more important, than anything you put in your outreach, right? So what I recommend and I practice what I preach, I was doing this, yesterday and today, is I recommend splitting it out where you spend, all of your time just researching the ideal customer that you're trying to target and to see if there's any sort of connection, right? So you can do a lot when it comes to research. So number one is you need a good understanding of who your ideal customer is, which you've already outlined. They work with a lot of our similar customers. I mean, our similar, they work with similar companies. They over-index for our audience and all that stuff, right? But you also need to understand who the ideal person is at those companies that make the decision, right? So what is the job title that typically buys from you, right? And so those are the two key factors, understanding a deep understanding of the company size, their typical needs, their budget, how many employees they have, where they're located, all of that, right? Any details you could find around that it matches who typically your best customers look like. Then taking a step deeper and saying, okay, so who at those companies likely are the ones who make decisions? And usually you might have an understanding as to like, okay, what is the typical job titles? What are their roles? You could then take a look at their LinkedIn, right? Once you've identified the company, then go try to find the people and look at their responsibilities in their job description. Potentially look it up online to see if there's like articles that are relevant to your solution, stuff like that, right? Gather as much information as you can. And here's a key piece, which is seeing if you have any mutual connections. If there's any sort of mutual connection between you and them, and that could be a person. It could be, all right, we both worked with somebody on my team, this could be somebody that went to your college. This could be somebody that was in your program, et cetera, right? What sort of connections that you have with them that you can reference? Also, you work at a company, most likely you didn't start the company, right? So there may be some history. Researching the history between them as well. Gather all those details and try to make a list. Don't reach out to them right away because then you get distracted. Continuing down the list of dedicating time to finding those people, writing all of that down so that way the next day or whenever you do outreach, you can then use that information to tailor your outreach and put enough thought and strategy into each one of those processes. So that's kind of the way I approach it, and I just think it's been effective.
Arguably the biggest takeaway that I've had from your book that's yielded the most immediate result has been splitting research and outreach into two. Because it's tempting to just, okay, you're in Media Radar, and then you go look in Sponsor United, and then you're looking at their LinkedIn. Okay, now I'm going to digest all this while it's on the top of my mind and write the perfect email. And man, I have got so much more productivity out of I am going to do this research block and I am going to do this prospecting block. And it's something that is a lot of your book affirmed things that I've seen elsewhere or experienced success doing myself. That was a new revelation that I really has has been great for me personally.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm glad to hear that, and I think that again, that goes back to the reasoning is because it has just as much, if not more, to do with who you're reaching out to and when versus anything you put in your email. So it's worth spending the extra time to finding those people, seeing what you can find about them, any connections. That will dramatically improve your effectiveness in your outreach.
No, that makes sense. Um, In doing that, I have found AI a useful tool for both outreach and crafting things that are very customized. Can you just talk about AI within sales? When I started teaching this course, the LLMs were in their infancy, and you would probably use them to like write a funny rap song about your friend, or now it's become much more than that. A lot of different projections on where that field is headed or the impact it'll have on many different industries, including our own. But do you want to just talk about AI, how you use it and how you view it?
Totally. And honestly, I do look at our careers, and I think that when we look back, we will look at it like that, of before AI and after AI. Because what it's allowed us to do is do a lot of the things that we used to spend a lot of time on doing manually, right? And a lot of brain power and strategic energy. It automates a lot of that for us, right? So, but what's important, and I think this is like a general rule of thumb, is one, you know, use AI to be more efficient at doing a lot of the things that you may have used to do manually, but you still need to be a critical thinker. You still need to do the things like human connect that require human connection, things that AI is just not as good at, right? And so the way I kind of look at it is like, back in the day, I used to use like an automated outreach tool, and I would create sequences to do more of the long tail outreach of, okay, I want to reach out to as many people as possible, long tail as I can, right? And it's about reaching more people with the right message as opposed to crafting and tailoring every single message, right? I still think there's a big part of that that's important for your outreach, which is you want to reach as many people so that way you can give yourself the best opportunity to reach the right person at the right time. It's not as important about tailoring the message, right? Now, AI can basically help with doing that, but while also tailoring the message. And the way that you might do that, and this is what I was doing earlier in the week, is to essentially like craft a list of companies and find the right people, then put everything I can about those companies and those people, including our own history, whether it be mine personally or my company's, right, into ChatGPT or another AI tool, and have it craft personalized messages very quickly. It's much easier to just copy and paste information that you gather from their website, their LinkedIn, your CRM, your email chains into ChatGPT and have it like personalize those messages, um, but again, that I would say shouldn't replace the more strategic outreach. So I break it out into two things, right? One is the long tail. I want to reach as many people as I possibly can. AI allows you to do that in a more automated fashion, right? By also tailoring it. And then the other ones, which is like, okay, I'm working on these opportunities. I know this person. I want to be strategic and use my own critical thinking to think about what should I reach out to them with, right? How can I advance this? And so for that, in my opinion, I want to be the one who crafts the email. I might use AI to edit it and optimize it and make it more digestible, but I want to be the one who thinks about exactly what I want to put in the message. And that's how you might use critical thinking with using AI to just do some light editing. So it's about balancing it. But yeah, AI has helped so many parts of the sales cycle, things like, taking notes and following up and all of it, even proposals. It's really optimizing everything. And where I think that, the salespeople that succeed are going to do is the ones that can use it very effectively, that don't shy away from it because, it's very helpful, but also still build those human connection skills and those basic sales skills that you still need. And you will always need because this is a human business and all a business is about working with people. So that's never going to change.
Now, one word I like to use when I think about AI is atrophy. So you want to have your critical thinking and never let that start going in the wrong direction. So don't let AI do your thinking for you, but use it to supplement, to complement, and like you said, to automate some of those mundane tasks. So I
Mhm.
have AI that does a lot of data entry for me into Salesforce now because that was a big time suck on my day where I couldn't do meeting prep or proposal writing or whatnot. But finding that balance is certainly a challenge, but I think you hit well how people could do that.
Yeah, one last thing I'll just say on the topic is, especially when you're starting out, um, you still need to understand the basics of sales. You still need to understand the basics. You still need to understand your company, your customers, right? You still need to understand and learn that and your industry, and your sales cycle and where to go to what, right? These are things that you still need to learn. AI can help with the learning process too, though. So what AI is great at and how I like to look at it is AI is pulling from the internet, right? So anything that you can find on the internet, AI can surface for you. So it can make that process easier. If you were going to research a particular company's website and you wanted to understand, like, what are the services and stuff like that, you can just plug in, hey, here's the company, here's the URL. Tell me everything I should know about this company, right? That can help with your learning, but you still need to learn those things because at the end of the day, right, your AI is not going to do your job for you. You need to know how to maximize the impact by what sort of inputs you put into it. And when you're in a conversation, AI is not going to be speaking on your behalf. So you need to really truly understand it and then use AI to supplement it and make you more efficient.
It is great for going through 1,000-page annual reports and earnings call transcripts and finding those bits that are the most applicable for you. That's one of my favorite use cases too. Um, Talk about, we just did our discovery calls as a team or as a class. Run an effective meeting. What does that look like to you? Uh, the structure of the meeting and not just going in and doing a presentation start to finish.
Yeah, so we kind of talked a bit about this a bit already, but what I'll just reinforce kind of like how it works in practice. Essentially, you want to do as much research as you possibly can about who you're talking to, about the company, about any history. Go in with a hypothesis of their likely challenges and likely value. Come in with some planned questions, so that way you have all of that ready, right, at the start of your meeting, and then you go in and you basically say like, thanks for taking some time. I learned this about you, right? I did my research. Here's a connection, right? Start out by building some credibility by telling them anything that you were able to learn to show that you're serious and that you have ideas as opposed to just me coming in and being very selfish and trying to get information from you. But you can't find everything online, right? So let them know like I want to ask a few questions up front just to confirm some of my learnings and make sure that our conversation is as relevant as possible. Then you ask questions about their challenges, their situation, like their resources, anything that you need to understand if they're qualified, which is do they have a need for your solution and do they have the capability of buying it? Uh, Once you've gathered all of those details, then you should have a firm understanding of, okay, what are their, like, how can we help them with our solution? So you basically say, okay, so based on what you've told me, here's what I think would be a good fit, and here's why. Those are your needs you mentioned. You said that you have challenges with turnover. Here's how we helped you with turnover. and this is the way it would work, right? And then you get their feedback. You say like, what do you think? Like, do you think this would help what you're looking for? And make it more of a back and forth conversation. And then you weave in examples or stories that help bring your solution to life about similar customers. So you say basically like, you mentioned that like you're very like you're spending a lot of time compiling reports or going in and out of different platforms and stuff like that. Like, a client of mine was in your exact same similar situation. They were also concerned that they've never used a tool like this before, but they had a problem with inefficient operational processes. What we did for them was we were able to onboard them in a very like seamless crawl, walk, run approach. They have since been using the platforms, and what they've told us is that they've never been more efficient. They're getting back to clients a lot faster. Turnover has dropped off dramatically. And so I think based on that, you would experience something similar. Like, what do you think?
Man, I think that you summed that up quite well. Um, you're having the meeting, you have your hypothesis, you feel good about what you're pitching, but then you start to come up against some objections. Can you just talk
Hmm.
about your approach to objection handling and
Hmm.
uh, overcoming that, and not just overcoming it in like an argumentative way of, you're wrong,
Hmm.
but finding that balance of how do you actually keep that conversation heading towards something that is mutually beneficial?
Hmm. Yeah, and not like in a manipulative way, right? Like you see
Yes,
like
yes,
tactics of like
that's the word I
deploying
was
it,
looking for.
like yeah, like you see a lot of sales gurus that talk about like here are the ways that you can deflect objections or whatever. And that's not really the approach. Maybe that worked back in the day. Maybe it works for small ticket items. But at the end of the day, with larger sales, you really do need to be able to help them. And so I don't look at objections like objections, right? I look at them as concerns that are either valid or not valid, right? And it's my job to uncover whether they are or not. And then if they are valid, maybe they're not qualified, right? And that's okay too. But if it's, a objection like a concern about price or a concern about their ability to onboard it, just due to like a lack of knowledge about our education or just like worried about onboarding something, or even if it's like, okay, this happens all the time, you may have one thing that I'm looking for, but you don't have everything I'm looking for, right? So what our job is to dig deeper into it and then educate them on whether it is that like how it may not make as much sense or why there could be a supplementary solution. So just to kind of give you an example, okay, let's say that I'm talking to you and you are concerned that our dashboard doesn't integrate with the one you're currently using, right? Okay, that's a very realistic scenario. How I might approach that is like totally understand that. That is a legitimate concern. However, you do have a few options. One, our dashboard has the same capabilities as your existing one. So, when does just so I know, like, when does your current contract end? Right? And you say, okay, it's end of year. Okay. Well, so you have a couple options here. One, you could always consolidate your technology through us, get the same exact features. Like I hear this all the time. Clients, were previously using that dashboard. They used ours. There's been no drop off. That's one solution. You could wait till the end of the year and do that. If you don't want to do that, no problem. There are other features that you could take advantage of that align well, and it wouldn't add too much operational inefficiencies by using both. You could save money in this area by continuing to use them, right? Or another possible approach is, okay, well, continue to use that dashboard for these clients, but there are other clients, like start out with one, see what it's like, see if you get a similar experience or not. Don't bring everything over, don't make a change immediately. Start small, and then once you see what that experience is like, you can then make a determination as to whether it would be feasible to slowly transition over. So that's what I mean by like how to approach objections is don't look at them as like set in stone. It can either be a legitimate objection, in which case they're not qualified and you shouldn't waste your time because it won't work out in the end. or it could be due to a lack of education or a lack of knowledge about something, a limited knowledge, I should say. And in that case, our job is to educate them and fill in the gaps.
I know we're coming up on time, and I think one of the most best parts of your book is just you sharing your personal experience because I think your story is really relatable. And it's relatable if you're selling like I'm selling, or if you want to go somewhere else in business, like a lot of folks in this program. Would love to just talk a little bit more about your journey going from 0 to 350 million. That doesn't happen overnight, but would love to talk more about the path to get there. And I think I'll butcher this quote because I'm doing it from memory, but there's something that you said in the book of like, it's really easy to be enthusiastic on day one, but it's about 6 months in where you decide if you really want to do sales or not. Do you want to talk about those first 6 months?
Yeah, yes, because honestly, they are the hardest 6 months when you first start at a company in sales or when you're first entering into sales. And the reason for that is because a lot of your sales success comes down to experience. And as you go, you learn things, right? You learn what works, learn what doesn't work. You learn how to be flexible with your pricing. What do you make, how do you recommend for what and what scenarios, right? That stuff you can't just learn. That's you get that through life experience, right? And so it is true that like there is a onboarding ramp up period that you as a salesperson need to push through. And a lot of people can't. It's harder than most people think. It's hard to prepare for how difficult it is. But if you have the right mentality going into it, which is this, you know, I'm not going to be great at first. It's going to be extremely hard, but I'm going to start somewhere and get better and get better. And I'm going to push through. And one thing you can always do is activity and hard work. That's something that, is how you get to that next level and push through, right? So for me, it was very much in the beginning. I'm going to reach out to hundreds of people a day. I'm going to set up 5 meetings a week. I'm going to set up as many meetings as I possibly can, right? And in each meeting, I'm going to, try to get better. And because of the things we talked about in the beginning, which is a lot of like pitching, not really truly understanding like the sales, how to actually conduct sales meetings appropriately, not really knowing exactly what to look for and all that. Some of those early meetings, are not going to go great. They may not turn into closed sales, but if you continue to do that, you continue to get better, you ask for feedback, you stay humble, you learn from others, then slowly and surely your meetings will get better, the opportunities will get more realistic, and then some of them will close. It is a numbers game, and it also has to do with there's basically an art and a science to it, right? The science is giving yourself as many opportunities as possible, and that requires purely hard work and activity, and usually more than most people expect. But if you create opportunities over and over again, some of them will just close. And then there's the art, which is getting better at and really understanding how to have successful meetings. So that way, the more meetings you have, the more productive each one will get. So you'll need to have less meetings to actually make sales. And you'll know what's actually what to look for, right? So just to kind of like summarize my experience, it was a lot of those initial meetings. It was getting some kind of harsh feedback, but reading sales books, learning on my own, and trying to continue to improve. Then, once I made that first sale, which happened to be that initial meeting I talked to you about in the beginning with my manager, it ended up closing. And so once I did that, then I learned what actually worked, what to look for. And then after that, each deal got a little bit easier. It's always hard. It's going to be hard your entire career. There's no way about it. There's no way to succeed in sales without hard work, but you can get better at the fundamentals and you will get better as you get more experience. So just push through it, and it can be very lucrative and it can be very rewarding, especially when you look at sales the way that it should be looked at, which is my job is to find as many people to help in as many ways as possible and build strong long-term relationships. That's really what it's about. That's the enjoyable part of it. So look at yourself as more of a consultant, a strategic advisor, and not as much as like a vendor, a sleazy salesperson. And you will, the hard work will be easier because you'll know that it's for a reason, not just manipulating people.
That's amazing, and I think really relatable. in the book, I think you said that that first sale was like 20 or $25,000.
Hmm.
Just talk about going from landing that first deal, five-figure spend, to being a top sales producer, leading your company in revenue and building a book of business that over 350 million closed. Just talk about that process, how you've grown, and then maybe how you've nurtured and grown some of those accounts over time.
Yeah. So to get from that first meeting, I mean, so that first sale, which is $20,000 to $350 million, what it requires is a bit of luck, but I always say like hard work creates luck, right?
Hmm.
So if you create as many opportunities as possible, like some of them will be whales, and I just happen to land one. And but really, even if you land one, you need to grow the relationship, right? So here's how it kind of went, right? Just steadily improving on my sales processes, right? Then just started closing more deals, some big, some small, but just stacking them up, right? That built my confidence. The more deals I closed, the more I learned, and each deal got easier. Then what ultimately ended up happening was I stumbled upon a huge opportunity the same way as I did any of the other opportunities, and won a massive test. It happened to be with a huge marketer. And so, that could have been one and done, right? But what got me from there to growing it massively is building the relationship, making sure that I understand they're always happy, getting to know them personally, understanding their business objectives, proving ourselves time and time again, making sure that we're always buttoned up. That's being a leader on your team to make sure that you're always achieving their expectations, their objections, right? And over time, it just grew year after year. Things changed over time that I had to refocus on, but it was always geared towards their business and making sure that like our solution was directly aligned with what they cared about so that way we could reach their full potential. And so I was able to build a decent book of business. Then I switched to my current company and moved over to selling software, which is a whole other sale. But because of the relationships that I've built over time, and the sales, same process, learning the sales cycle, I was able to build a book of business which was consistent of smaller clients, mid-sized clients, and really large client. And over time, that's helped continue to reap rewards. And my relationships have just gotten better and better and stronger and stronger. They look at me as less of a vendor and more of like a partner who is an extension of their team. That's how you truly grow, a successful sales career is by focusing on your clients, making them like family, and continuing to build on the fundamentals and always learning so that way they can't do their job without you.
Andrew, you shared a ton. I could talk to you or listen to you talk all day long. Just a wealth of information. We appreciate you sharing all of this. If people want to find more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, you can go to my website, andrewbarbuto.com. You connect with me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Andrew Barbuto. And you can find my book, Top Sales Producer, as well as the workbook on Amazon or anywhere that books are sold.
That's amazing. Anything else before we wrap?
You can check out my YouTube video. My YouTubes, I got like dozens of them that are like really based on 101 stuff. But I would just say this: if you leave with anything from this conversation, it's sales is truly about helping people. I know it sounds cliche, but the best salespeople are the ones that are laser focused on their clients' needs, not trying to persuade them to buy, but trying to uncover how they can help and then finding new ways to help them. That's how you will succeed, and that's how you will build strong relationships in the process. It's going to be really hard, but push through. And the more work you do, the more rewards you will see eventually. It doesn't happen right away, but just like anything else, if you continue to stay at it, you can be very successful and make more money in this career than you can in any other career. That's not professional NASCAR driver.
Andrew, thank you so much.